Welcome back to another edition of Guru Talk. I'm Dave Palumbo, and today's topic is going to be an interesting one. It's going to be working with high-profile athletes in today's world of social media, being judged by everyone and anyone who has a keyboard or a phone. And helping me to discuss this topic is going to be my friend and current, I guess you could say, fellow guru, Dom Mutascio. What's up?
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me on the show, man. How are you?
Absolutely. Now, Dom, it's funny because, you and I have discussed this, many times in the past about the challenges that go along with working with higher profile athletes, like guys that are on the Olympic. I'm not even talking about pros. I'm talking about guys that are like on the Olympia stage where they're under a microscope, not only by the judges and by themselves, but by social media. This is something that never in the history of bodybuilding was ever something that athletes had to worry about. When I competed, back in the 90s and 2000s, the magazines would write an article about you maybe prior to the show just to pump you up. And then they would kind of critique you after the show occurred, but never on a daily basis were athletes being critically, judged, aside from maybe the guys who saw you in the gym all covered up. But this is a unique type of, situation. Now, you're a coach, you've worked with high profile athletes. We're going to talk about that in a minute. What are the challenges that you see in today's day and age?
So I think that, social media has been both great for the fitness industry, but at the same time, absolutely horrible. For many reasons. Like, once it creates a false sense of reality to a lot of people. And also anything that you do or put out there, people are going to speculate and, draw different conclusions, and usually will stir up different drama. But social media has been good on the flip side to help, promote the sport and get it out there amongst a much larger audience. But like I said, nowadays, especially when you're working with higher profile athletes, it's everything you do, people will, twist it around and kind of speculate on their side of things, which, that gets frustrating at times when you're trying to focus on the important things. And, you have some of these other distractions that are constantly, coming up. And both as a coach and an athlete, you have to learn how to pretty much block that out and, stay focusing on the variables that are important.
It's interesting because, nowadays, if an athlete puts up a picture, you're not even sure if it's really an accurate picture because there's so many filters and things that people could do to the pictures. And then on top of that, you have these people at home who probably have no expertise in bodybuilding other than the fact that they're just jealous that they're not big bodybuilders and successful. And they'll sit and they'll analyze if you have a pimple on your shoulder, or if you have a little lump on your butt, or if you have a varicose vein in your leg. I mean, the minutia that people will come up with on social media, it's amazing that they have that much time to do this, but they do, and people love doing this, and it puts a tremendous amount of pressure, I think, on the athlete who actually reads all the comments, because they're constantly being critiqued by a bunch of morons mostly, but it doesn't matter because when you read it, it registers in your brain.
Yeah, and nowadays, to be successful at the high level, a thing that's a big factor is you have to be able to kind of block that stuff out.
Yeah.
Where I don't care who you are, if you are consistently staying on these platforms and reading negativity, and a lot of the stuff is just ridiculousness, saying that picture looks weird. Oh, that guy's has loaded with synthol, and then all these people start saying all these comments. But to be successful, at a high level, you have to be able to have the ability to pretty much block that out and not pay any mind to these types of things.
Right. I'll give you a good example. I breed reptiles. I breed snakes and everything like that. And I have a reptile channel. It's called Muscle Serpents University, and I do educational snake videos and stuff like that on there. And what people love to watch them. It's very pet tube. It's called pet tubers. People who do pet videos and animal videos. It's very popular on YouTube. But there's the same trolls that you get in the bodybuilding world are on there. And if you put up a video about a snake that you're doing, it could be the most gorgeous snake. If there's like a piece of poop or like a pee stain on the pad on the
probably say animal cruelty.
Yeah, they're like, look at how disgusting these animals are being kept in horrible conditions.
Yeah,
animals go to the bathroom. There's a reason why there's bedding in the cage. It's like a hamster. Hamsters poop, like 40 times a day. So that's why there's bedding in there. But there's always people, critiquing, and if you allow it to affect you, it's going to destroy you. Now, having said that, I'd like to move more to the coaching because you coach a lot of athletes. I've coached thousands of athletes over the last 25, 30 years. And I've seen the way it's evolved because of social media. Let's address, obviously, the elephant in the room. The last time we had you on the show, you had just started working with Nick Walker. Nick had left Matt Jensen as coach and was looking for a new coach. And you guys seem to kind of jive together and resonate. And you were telling us about how you were working with him. You worked with him, I believe, almost a full year, right?
Yeah, it was like 10 months. About that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we heard, obviously, the whole, Nick is working with Matt again, or Nick left you and working with Matt. Can you tell us what went on? I mean, because this is relevant to this GuruTalk topic about working with high-profile athletes. There's ups and there's downs. It seemed like you guys had a really successful offseason together.
Yeah, no. So, make a long story short, I figured this topic would come up, and I would rather just discuss it to put it behind us because it is something that constantly comes up. And, I really at first wasn't going to even speak about it because I want to get on with my life. I have a lot of important things going on. He needs to also focus on his Olympia prep. So, but, it's better just to discuss this and get it out there. But pretty much, like any other, this happens very often in the industry where people switch coaches, which we understand that. My time with him, we started 10 months ago. And on the previous show that I did with you, I had said at first, I didn't know if it was going to be, necessarily a good fit for him when he reached out to me. We were talking back and forth for about a month or so back in January. And I told him before, this conversation can even go further, that I needed to see certain specific sets of previous lab work and cardiovascular tests. So after I said that to him, I didn't know if I'd ever hear from him again. To my surprise, only 3 or 4 days later, he sent me over 80% of the documentation that I wanted. So I was like, okay, maybe then it would be a good fit, because my particular method of coaching, especially if it's someone at that level, it's a little bit different as far as monitoring the athlete and doing things a certain way. But like I said, in the beginning, he got all of that over. He went for all the additional cardiovascular tests that I wanted him to go for. And then, then we began our journey. Throughout the off season, everything was great. We estimated through doing calibrated tests that he put on probably about 16 or 17 pounds of true stage tissue.
This pictures you sent me were from April. He was 300 pounds. He was really lean here too. Crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll tell you, the biggest difference, which, I've turned about 40 people pro, but he's my first top 5 Olympian working with. But the rate that he puts tissue on is unlike anything I've ever seen. And, people, I'm sure, will speculate and love to say, oh, that's from tons of exogenous hormones and whatnot. But no, it's just, like I said, one, his genetics, and he is very consistent as far as not missing meals. He hasn't missed a meal probably since 2018. Which
that's what you got to do, man. I tell people all the time, you want to be successful.
So as far as him putting on tissue, that comes very, very easily. But when he had hired me, I told him the main focuses, which the expectation was not for him to just go and place 5th at the Olympia. The expectation was for him to go to win the Olympia. And in my honest professional opinion, the variables that needed to be most focused on was, 1, bringing his waistline down about 1.25 inches to at least 1.5 inches, putting on some additional tissue on his outer sweeps, getting better separation in his quads, and a little more tissue on his backside. So those were the main variables. Now, to do that, you know, it's one thing to say it, but to actually accomplish these things, in his case, we would have to do things that were a little bit different. Now, to bring someone's waistline down and, let's say, get rid of visceral fat, there's like only 3 different ways that you can go about it. You know, getting into ketosis and also possibly doing fasting windows. Now, some of it is a little counterintuitive also to winning the Olympia, you know, doing these different things. But throughout the off season, it was great. Like I said, he put on a ton of tissue. And where we left off conditioning wise, I had Steve actually look at some of his check-ins. He's a man usually that doesn't give too many compliments, and said that, you know, he was pretty blown away by the amount of tissue that he put on, and said conditioning wise, he was in a great spot. But, you know, with prepping someone at that level, there's much more that goes into it than, you know, where their physique is at month to date and, you know, just eating chicken and rice. You know, an athlete's mental state is everything. So while we were going throughout this journey, the things that I kind of needed him to do in regards to bringing his waistline down, the other important things were like with posing, pulling out his lats, mobility work. A lot of the extra stuff that I needed him to do for that, you know, he wasn't accustomed to, you know, which added a lot more work. And in the beginning, all of this stuff, like we were on the same page. You know, he went for all this additional stuff that I wanted him to do, went for all the additional labs and cardiovascular tests. But once we, like I said, got into like prep, around the 14-week out marker, I noticed that he was just giving me like resistance on certain things. Some things were little things too, like little things just with like training, whether I wanted him to do leg extensions and he didn't want it. But, you know, I sat him down and I told him, look, like those things, like we can meet somewhat halfway, but some of the other things, the reasons why you hired me for, you know, to bring your waistline down, to keep your health in the best possible place while contending to win the Olympia. Because, you know, let's face it, competing at this level, no matter how safe you are, it's not the healthiest thing. But in my perspective, there is a right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things.
Absolutely.
Now,
100%.
The right way to do things, it does require a lot more work. It's a pain in the ass. You know, you might have to go for different tests and whatnot. And even the stuff with like bringing down like someone's waistline and mobility stuff, they have to do all this other tedious stuff that really is not that much fun. And it's outside of the normal bodybuilding realm. But in my honest opinion, those are the main variables that would close the gap from him being able to place 5th or 6th at the Olympia and potentially, you know, winning the Olympia. So that's how I noticed that he was giving me a little resistance on that stuff. And there was other little things like when I came out there. Good.
Hold on. Let me just stop you a second. His waist did come down almost 2 inches, right?
No, it did. About little under an inch and a half. Yeah. So it did come down. And, yeah, no. And, you know, he had to do things that he wasn't used to. We went through a phase where he went on a limited inflammatory based phase where we removed any inflammatory based foods.
Like what? Sugary foods, you mean?
So pretty much like anything that had dairy in it, even whole eggs, red meat, removed gluten, had him do a phase where he was on lower protein.
Like a detox, like a detox, like you would do, yeah.
Yeah. So there was just like little things, like even when I was coming out there, like part of the thing that we worked out was the last 11 weeks I would come out to Tampa so that I could, you know, be with him and oversee his prep and monitor his body very closely. And originally when I was going out there, I told him what the best move to do is with your training is to have me go to the gym and actually train you. And then I'll go back to the gym later and do my workout or whatever, you know, but he actually insisted he wanted me to work out with him, which I said, look, whatever is going to be best for you, I would have preferred me actually training him. You you know, he said that I guess he gets more motivated by having a workout partner.
Sure, of course.
So, but yeah, so it was just little things, little variables like that it started with. But at the end of the day, like, and I told him this, that, you know, mentally, if you're not in a good spot, it doesn't matter where you're at, how much progress you made, because that's really what made him very successful, is him having that confidence in the mental state that he was in. So I noticed
Why wasn't he in a good mental state, Dom? It seemed like everything was going according to plan. His waist came down. He put the weight on, the muscle mass on that he wanted. He looked good. He sounded good. You know, when I would watch him on his Instagram and everything. So where do you think what was breaking down? I mean, was he missing his friendship with Matt? I mean, I don't know what was the problem.
So just the last 2 or 3 weeks, I just noticed like he didn't have that confidence, that like, I wasn't even saying, it was just his mental state started to shift a little bit, where, you know, he wasn't the old original Nick that I previously started.
Did that been chalked up as just a contest prep, you know, irritability?
No, well, I think the main thing is, because I had even brought up to him, I said, look, like, would you feel more comfortable? I think maybe you'd be more comfortable working with someone else. And, you know, he stopped me and he told me, and he brought up a good point. For 4.5 years, he was used to doing something a certain way for 4.5 years. But aside from that, he also built a very close relationship with Matt. They were like family. And, you know, I think that was probably one of the main variables, is he like missed having that friendship. And when we first spoke too, I had told him, like, I don't think that you should try to fix something that isn't broken, to maybe try to talk it out and mend his relationship with him. But at that time, you know, he had said that, you know, it's not going to go that way. Like, I need to figure out something else to do. And I said, look, if you've exhausted all, you know, options with trying to communicate and work things out, then, you know, as long as you get me some of this medical documentation, we're on the same page, we could consider moving forward. And yeah, like, so then after that, I told him too, that I think it's stupid, like, if him and Matt weren't friends anymore, that they should at least try to mend their friendship, because they've had, you know, such a good 4.5 years together, that it's stupid not to be cordial and friends with each other.
Of course.
So, you know, I always, you know, pushed him to try to mend their friendship.
You know, what was interesting was, you know, when I had heard, you know, some rumors through my little chains of, you know, whatever, my little birds that whisper in my ear, that you guys you weren't coaching him anymore, and that he left you. And I, you know, Dom and I are friends. So I called Dom up, and you were like, almost like you didn't even, you know, you hadn't even heard that you guys had broken up yet. It was almost like a shock to you. You were like the last person to find out for some reason.
Well, not really, because the last time I was in Tampa, we did sit down and have a serious talk, like, where I did bring up to him going to another coach.
Gotcha.
And, you know, he said at that time he wasn't even thinking about that at all.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, look,
basically you dismissed it, I guess.
I sat down with him and said, look, on your trajectory, which our game plan was to get him ready early, by 3.5 weeks out, to have him stage ready, so we could start pulling his cardio back, and increasing his food. Because when you prep a super heavyweight bodybuilder, it's entirely different than prepping a smaller level, like, competitor. Absolutely. If they don't have that fullness and that wow factor to them, it completely diminishes their entire physique. So the last thing that I told him, the last position that you need to be in is be those last 3 weeks where you're digging,
killing yourself,
and pushing your body into the ground. You want to be at the point where you can start backing off of your cardio, increasing your food going into the show, almost like you're rebounding into the show. So after that conversation, I said, look, this is where your trajectory needs to be, where it broke out to being he needed to drop about 2 pounds of body fat every 8 days. And I said, look, I'm going to go back to LA. At that time, I was doing the Anderson Silva training camp with my girlfriend. And I said, we'll be in touch and go from there. And then when you had texted me that, I had reached out to him to ask him, look, have you spoken to Matt? And I didn't care at all if he wanted to go work with him. Like, I was pretty much telling him mentally, if you're not in a good place, that might be the smartest thing to do. But, at that time he told me, no, that, some people love to speculate. And then I didn't hear from him. And then I pretty much found out the same way everyone else did.
Online. Yeah. Instagram post.
Yeah.
And have you guys spoken since then?
Not really. And that's the only thing. Like, look, I have nothing bad.
You guys were friends, weren't you? I mean, you guys were talking all the time.
Absolutely. I mean, I would consider him like someone like in my family. I would have done anything for him. I mean,
right.
When we were prepping together, like, I had to put a lot of stuff on hold. Like, I was opening a wellness clinic that was going to open in January. I had to push that off to May now, just because, like I said, during that time frame, even little things, I would be out with my family. I would have to go to Staples to send a fax to get a prior authorization to get certain food allergen panels done, or different cardiovascular tests that I wanted to have done so we could start the Olympia prep 2 weeks early, flying back and forth to Tampa. So yeah, we were very close. I don't have anything bad to say about him, but I do just wish that maybe things were handled a little bit differently at the end. Right. But we know
Nick seems like a good guy. It was awkward for him, and he didn't handle it, maybe the way he should have, which should have been, honestly, I don't think you would have taken it. You're not the kind of guy that gets like butthurt. I think you would have been, if he would have just been honest and said, hey, you know what, I feel more comfortable with Matt, I want to finish the prep out with him, you would have been like, okay. Right. I mean,
yeah. I mean, my advice to him was like, look, regardless of how you're responding, which we went over this, the last time I changed his diet, he dropped like 6 pounds the first 5 days, and then we kept it at a rate about 3 pounds a week. But I said, regardless of any of these other variables, if mentally you seem off, and he also had just relocated to Tampa, I feel like he was trying to find the place where he was most comfortable. But I said, look, like, you need to get into a good mental state. That's where you're going to be the most deadliest. And I said, whatever that may be, that needs to happen.
Yeah. Now he was training with Kamala out there for a while, and I figured that was a good fit for the two of them. And then now he's in Vegas, right? I believe.
I guess so. Yeah. Now he is. Yeah.
But hey, you know what? Like I said, I always tell all my clients that too. I said, you got to do whatever is good for you. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, because you have to. In other words, you have to remove yourself from the equation. You're the coach. You'll be there as much as the person needs you until they don't need you anymore. And that's fine. And you can't take it personally, and I think I don't think you do take it personally, but I think, like I said, the one thing that might have left a bad taste in your mouth was that it seems like he just didn't communicate. You should have been the first one to know before everyone else knew. I think that would have been a better way to handle it.
I mean, listen, it is the best decision. Like, I wanted this to happen because, look, if he wasn't going to be doing some of the extra things or not feeling comfortable doing them, then, the last thing I would want to do is to go into a prep like that with all that pressure. And
no, I was gonna say, what was the one thing that you really wanted him to do that he didn't want to do?
I mean, the main things were like bringing his waistline down. I mean, the three most important things.
But he did that. He accomplished that, which is right.
But it's still, there were little things like I was telling him, which you give me your opinion on this. The last 8 weeks, he's eating obviously a decent amount of food. So, sometimes he's having 350 grams of rice in a meal. If you switch 70% of your protein source to fish, digestion-wise, I feel like that would be a big benefit. Just little things like that. But the three most important variables that were like non-negotiable to me, that was why I feel like I was being hired, was one, to bring like his waistline down, to put on the tissue in the areas that needed to be, and also to make sure that his health was in the best possible place. That we're going to contend for the Olympia title, but it's not going to shed 5 years off of your life or risking having a heart attack, because a lot of times when you're at this elite level, it's easy to get distracted by being in the moment of trying to achieve a small-term goal.
You'll do anything in that moment, right? You'll do anything.
Where you're not thinking about some of the other things that you may be doing that could potentially affect you later on. So those were my three main variables really to look out for him. And I could tell, like, the things, like I said, even with like breathing stuff, like I was making him do mouth taping at night. At first, he was not very happy about doing that. But when I was finally able to get him to do it, then he was like, "Oh, I'm actually sleeping better now."
Now, what is that? What does mouth taping do for you?
So, like, from me staying with him, I noticed that he had sleep apnea, especially when
which pretty much everyone over 260 has. But go ahead,
yeah. So I originally got him a authorization of a sleep study, but it was taking forever to get him into it. So I had him working with a specialist that was doing this mobility work to help bring his waistline down and also to help him with his posing. And this guy's also like a breathing expert. So I let him know about some of the things I was assessing with his like breathing when he was sleeping, that he was pretty much breathing out of his mouth.
Right.
So a way that you can kind of work on correcting that and also working on sleep apnea is if he just puts a Band-Aid over his mouth, that actually will train his body to start breathing through his nose and breathing the right way.
Is that something good that people should do? I never heard of that, to be honest with you. This is the first time I've ever heard of that. So this is
if you want to like have some more like research on it, you should read a book. It's called Breathe. It's all about how breathing can affect your body, your health, your waistline. It's pretty surprising when you would read it, how much breathing has a lot to do with everything.
Right. So, I mean, if you're already having trouble breathing at night because you're so big and, your throat maybe has some issues, wouldn't taping your mouth shut give you almost like an anxiety attack? Like you feel like you're suffocating?
At first, you may feel like that. It feels a little uncomfortable, but you'll see once you go to sleep and you're doing the mouth taping, when you wake up the next morning, you will notice that you just feel way more rejuvenated.
Really? Interesting. I want to try it now. That's so what do you do? Put a Band-Aid over your mouth just so it keeps you from opening your mouth?
Band-Aid or like kinesis tape you can do too. I just don't know if I would do it like if you have a deviated septum or something like that.
Right.
And I'm not a like breathing expert. I mean, my expertise are in nutrition, but
you don't want to die in their sleep and then blame you for this.
Yeah, I don't want someone to tape their mouth and end up dying in the morning. So I don't know if, like I said, if you have a deviated septum or something like that, if that would be the smartest thing to do.
So, but what you're saying is it's better to breathe through your nose at night. You get a better restful night's sleep. I wonder what the science of that is.
Absolutely, 100%.
Do you know what the scientific what's the whole shtick behind it? I mean, why do they say that breathing through your nose gives you better quality sleep?
To be 100% honest, like I said, I'm not an expert in it.
Okay,
but I do know that you do not want to breathe through your mouth. You want to breathe through your nose, and I do know too, breathing through your mouth that can also affect your waistline.
Interesting. You don't understand how, or it's just something you just read.
The person that I go through for is a close friend of mine, Andreas. And I have this other guy, Jason, and they're like experts in this stuff. That was one of the guys that I had Nick working with to help bring his waistline down.
Right. Did he find that? Did he do the work that this guy? Did he work with him? I mean, did he notice that he got a better result from that?
So he did, but this was the part about me going out there. You could tell he did not like doing it, but he did do it. But it was very hard to get him to do these things.
What were the exercises you had to do to help facilitate that?
There were things like where he would supposed to have a pull-up bar, where he was supposed to be doing these particular types of like leg raises and also different breathing exercises while doing planks, and also doing like these these hanging like leg type of raises from a pull-up bar.
Okay.
But there was a lot of other variables that would seem non kind of conventional bodybuilding related, like the DNA testing that we did that we never ended up getting the results back. I mean, you've done it before, and wouldn't you agree with me?
It's great. It's a great
if you're
tool
at an elite level, and you have access to doing something like that. That could be a potential game changer.
Dom, I'm testing my kids. I want to know what my kids have weaknesses genetically are and what their strengths are, because that will dictate, a whole lifetime of knowledge for them. So, I mean, the new generation has this technology that we never had, when we were growing up. So,
yeah, I mean, it essentially could tell you too, also, because there's another misconception that, people think they need to nuke their estrogen, go in any sort of prep. Doing this test can confirm a lot of that, and it could also confirm what sorts of actual medications, not only performance enhancing drugs, but antibiotics and different things like that, that systematically might not be working the same way in your body as it would for someone else's.
Absolutely, 100%. Like I'm a very high, from my DNA testing, I'm a very high DHT converter. So I convert my testosterone at a very high rate to dihydrotestosterone, which is probably why I lost my hair. And
even with finasteride?
What?
Even with finasteride or dutasteride?
Now, when I take finasteride, I'm still not low. I'm normal. So imagine that. I'm on no testosterone. I'm taking a DHT blocker, 2.5 milligrams of finasteride a day. And when I test my DHT, it's not low. It's like in the mid-range. So imagine what it is on steroids and without a DHT blocker. It was probably through the freaking roof. I never had it tested back when I was competing. So, but that's because I'm a high converter, but I'm a very low converted to estrogen. So I don't need a lot of aromatase inhibitor. And if I take some, it lowers my estrogen too much. Had I known all this when I was competing, that would have given me a lot of valuable information, that I could have used to make myself better, obviously.
Absolutely. And those are like every coach has a different way and system that they go about things. And, depending on the athlete and their circumstance, these are the different things that I try to really focus on. And like when someone reaches out to me, one of the first things I ask them, do they want to have children in the future?
Sure.
Because now that I'm opening this clinic, I'm getting a lot of people that used to compete or used to use a lot of exogenous hormones, that some of them used to use them through some of these clinics that were wrongly prescribed. And now later on in life, they're infertile because they didn't do the right things that they were supposed to when they were doing some of this stuff.
Right. Yeah, you got to use the Palumbo baby making protocol.
Oh, no.
You guys should have your own your clinic sell HMG, HCG, and Clomid.
Glutathione.
What?
Yeah, glutathione too. That's good for motility.
Glutathione, huge for mobility. My third child, I tell the story all the time. My third child was conceived just on glutathione. I wasn't taking any other birth control. I wasn't taking any other fertility drugs. I wasn't using HMG or HCG because I thought I was done. But I was taking glutathione for health. Little did I know it really cranks up sperm motility.
Yeah.
And I got my third baby because of that. So
pretty much all cells in your body just way healthier, essentially.
Yes.
It really does. But like I said, a lot of these people, they don't know this. And, I'm a big advocate of, you can compete at a high level, but you shouldn't have to, your future life shouldn't be dictated by what you did during prep.
Don, here's the problem. The problem is that people who are genetic freaks, the stuff comes so easy to them. Think about how much, look, let's talk. You and I are not on a genetic level with these Olympia guys, okay? We have above average genetics, and that's why we excel at bodybuilding, and we're really dedicated to the whole process. But we don't have their genetics. So we had to work really hard to get the results that we got. But when you have a guy who can go into the gym and look at a weight and look at a chicken breast and put on muscle, before he even takes an anabolic, and then you put an anabolic on top of that, and they just, it's hard to tell someone like that it comes so easily to that you're not doing it right. You know what I mean? And I understand that because you know what? It would be like someone telling me, Dave, I'm going to tell you how to diet. And I'm like, fuck, I could eat anything I want and lose weight. You know, I have a crazy metabolism, but I do look better on certain foods than not other foods. And I've realized that over the years, but I could eat whatever I want. And I'm like a blast furnace. So it's hard to give me advice, you know, when I was coming up on what I should and shouldn't be eating. But, you know, and so I understand that it's like trying to tell Flex Wheeler how to train his arms, you know, or Ronnie how to train your arms. Ronnie, you're training your arms all wrong. You're not controlling the negative. You're jerking the weight up. You know, you're not really flexing your biceps. And meanwhile, the guy's got 23-inch arms, and he's going to be like, "What the fuck is this guy talking about?"
Yeah, like
you understand. So there's that.
Of course, my whole thing on that is, look, you may have a physique goal to get your physique from point A to point B, which there may be 50 other coaches that can get you there, which there probably is. But the way that I look at it is, can we get you there and achieve other things as far as, you know, bringing your waistline down, keeping your homeostasis levels good, making sure your complete blood count markers are good, making sure that you're not having any plaque buildup, doing these little extras. Yes, it does require more work, whatever it may be, whether it's on the health spectrum or doing these other things as far as, you know, reducing chronic inflammation, bringing the waistline down, not only just putting tissue on, but putting it on in specific areas. That's kind of like the difference of that would make a particular coaching style a little more proprietary than others.
Sure. But you know how it works out. The most popular, you know, gurus out there mostly make their reputation based on working with guys that are genetically superior or women that are genetically superior anyway. So you really can't screw those people up too badly. And I think, once again, it's hard to work with an athlete who's so genetically, you know, ahead of everyone else. And then, you know, they're comfortable doing something a certain way and they've gotten good results with it. It's almost like they're afraid to change at this point. And I think that's probably the impediment that maybe you ran into with Nick. And like you said, you were very demanding and you gave him a lot to do. And he was like, well, you know, I look at the results I got, you know. And the funny thing is he got good results working with you, but you know what? Maybe it was a better fit for the offseason where he wasn't as nervous because he wasn't getting ready for a competition. And now it comes down to 8 weeks out. He's a little nervous because, you know, he always only done it a certain way and he doesn't want to mess up. In his head, it's, you know, he doesn't feel as comfortable. So I can understand where the reticence comes in on his part. The only thing I saw that I felt bad for you because, you know, I'm a good friend of yours is that I wish he would have communicated to you so that you knew first and then it would have been, you know, a surprise. You know, no one wants to find out on social. It's happened to me too, believe me. And I'm not going to mention names, but guys just, I don't know why they can't just be honest and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'll be like, fine, great. It's not going to affect my life. You know, I'd rather know than have to find out from one of my little minions who sends me text messages all day long. Did you read this? Did you hear that? You know, because I got like 30 guys that like are always like, did you catch this story? Sometimes they tell me the story before I even find it out myself. You know, I like to think I'm TMZ, but I'm really not. A lot of times I'm getting inside sources are telling me what's going on, and that's how I'm finding out. So that's the only thing I saw as like maybe a problem.
Yeah, and I mean, like at the end of the day, like he like missed having his relationship with him because they were very close.
Right.
I mean, I think even that they lived together for a period of time,
right.
And you know, they went from being such good friends that, you know, they're like family members, and you know, they were used to that, and I think that's what had a lot to do with it. And like, let's face it,
you should have left Matt to begin with. Matt, there was nothing. You know, Matt didn't do anything wrong. He had a perceived notion that Matt maybe didn't advise him properly on doing the Arnold or whatever the case may be. And so it was a misunderstanding. But you know what? I always say that everything happens for a reason. And the fact that he got to work with you 10 months and learn new techniques and new stuff, even if he didn't do everything you told him to do, he'll use that in the future. I guarantee you. And it's going to be because of you that those improvements were made and that you made an impact on him. You know, I always tell people I went to medical school for 3 years and I didn't finish and get my degree, but that doesn't mean I didn't get an education in those 3 years. I learned a shitload of material that I use every single day, stuff that no one else has available to them because they just didn't go through that type of training. So it's not like I didn't go, just because I didn't finish doesn't mean that I don't have all that information that I need at my beck and call. And same thing with Nick. He has a lot of information that he learned from you, and he should be thankful to you. And hopefully he compensated you for what you did for him.
Well, like I said, I don't need any sort of like credibility or gratification. I really honestly don't care about that at all. And at first, this is why like I was really hesitant about getting into this and if this would be a good fit. And in the beginning, I actually even told him too that I would have preferred, and I wouldn't mind if we kept this kind of like confidential until after the Olympia, just to avoid, just because he's a high level athlete, to avoid some of these things afterwards. Like, like I'm not bothered at all by the situation. I have a lot of other things going on. I need to focus on, all my other clients, opening these clinics that, like the last thing you want to do when you're, working with someone else is that they ask you something about this,
The reason we're discussing this, the topic is working with high profile athletes. And like I said, I want people to understand that it's not the same relationship a lot of times that then you have. Like, look, if I have someone who comes to me and says, Dave, I want to turn pro, I keep missing my pro card or maybe even a person who's not even at that level to even qualify for a pro. And I work with them for 5 years and then they get their pro card. And it's like we have this working relationship for long term. It's different than working with a pro, because pros are at a level where they kind of already achieved success. They're looking to get that little extra edge and find maybe something that they're missing and they're not doing right. Maybe their waist is too big, or maybe they can't grow their legs or something like that. And so they find a coach that can satisfy that. And then they move on to someone else who's going to, feel like they have a better fit with. It doesn't matter. It's a different dynamic. And you have to understand that these guys and girls are also being judged by social media. So there's a lot more stress involved with working with a higher profile, elite level athlete than there would be working with the typical bodybuilder or, fitness figure competitor that you work with. And that's really what this show is about. And that's why I thought it was relevant to discuss, what you did with Nick, and then what happened. And this is not uncommon. It happens a lot at that elite level.
Which, like I said, working with people at the elite level, people don't realize it's not so much just handing them a protocol and being like, okay, how's your body going to respond? It's much more on like a personal level that, you're really involved with, like, with their life. And there's a lot of other variables that go into it, which necessarily
is involved. Making money, Dom. That's why.
Yeah. I mean,
when you put money into the equation, when I'm talking about money, I mean, through their career, they're earning a living, whether it be prize money or endorsements or social media revenue. They're making money from this. This becomes a much more important thing to them. It's not just an ego, boost, which it is for most people, because most people it's just a hobby. I love it. I got my pro card, but let's face it, you made no money from doing that. You did it because you loved the sport. Now, will you go to another level and make money? Yeah, maybe, but it's a completely different animal, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, because at that point, it's not just a hobby. It's dictating how you're making your
career.
Right. Exactly, and it turns into a full-time job. And that's why, working with someone that is on that level, that is making a living out of it, the requirements and stuff that they may have to do is a little bit more, because now that's their life. It's not so much their hobby,
Yeah. The irony of this whole thing is that you're in Vegas now and Nick is in Vegas right now. And you're not working together. And Matt's in Florida, right? Or where is he?
Which usually is surprising, because he usually does prefer to be, but I think that he just needed probably like a change of like atmosphere, maybe. But I wish him the best. And look, like, based on the progress he made and where he's at, he shouldn't place anything lower than third. I would say, on where he's, all the improvements he's made and where he's at.
Can he win the Olympia in your mind this year?
I think if Ramy is off, then yes, I think that Nick made the necessary improvements that he needed to, as long as, like, he keeps his waistline in a good spot, his posing's good, and he comes in next level condition, then I think he has a very good shot at contending from the title. He shouldn't, like I said, place anything lower than third.
Can he beat Hadi Chupin?
I think it's really tentative based upon how much progress Hadi Chupin made. But before,
let's assume Hadi looks like he did last year. You know,
yes,
or you know,
without a question, yes.
Okay.
Because I told Nick going into this, every person that placed ahead of him, how he would potentially beat them. And I told him, you know, with Ramy, you don't play a size game with him.
No.
In that perspective, like when Ramy turns to the back, you need to make him look like he didn't even diet for the show.
Right.
So that, you know, the difference in conditioning is so apparent that judges can't look past that. And, you know, with a guy like Hadi Chupin, he's always going to be one of the most conditioned guys in the entire show. But at the end of the day, you know, if you're an equally as good a condition as him and you bring up certain weak areas and you're out muscling him by 35 pounds, that's a lot to look past.
That's why Ramy beats him, because he's so much bigger. What about Hunter Labrada, who's got the structure and shape, you know, well balanced? If he comes in shape, you know, he beat Nick last year and he probably shouldn't have, but he wasn't in the best shape. Let's say he comes in his best shape. How does Nick beat him?
So I think like with last year, like at the Olympia, in my honest opinion, I feel like Nick probably should have maybe placed ahead of him. It was very close.
Yeah,
but the reason why is because I believe that at the Arnold, Nick was a little bit better at the Arnold. He was a little bit fuller and he came into the Olympia a little on the flat side. So, you know, judges a lot of times will look at, and this is what I try to explain to competitors, it's not so much, you know, beating the guy that's next to you. It's almost like you're on a job audition. And if they see that you don't come in at least equally as good as the previous show, sometimes that can make or break what that placing is. Because I do feel like if you were just looking at them and not taking maybe that into account, how he looked 2 weeks prior, that he should have probably won. Beaten
the Hunter. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, Dom, I want to thank you for joining us today and being so candid and open. And I think you gave us some really good information, not only about how to work with, you know, high profile athletes, but some good techniques that I didn't know. You know, breathing, putting a Band-Aid on your mouth and breathe through your nose during the night.
Mouth tape.
I'm gonna try it. You know me, I try everything. You know. So
yeah.
I love to find out new stuff, and it's a pleasure to talk to you. And I guess you'll be at the Olympia. You live out there now. So when are you moving? You said you're moving to North Carolina, right?
In January, I'm moving there. Yeah. I'm going to be opening the clinics up in the spring. But I have like, I think 3 athletes doing the Olympia this year.
Cool. Enjoy yourself, and we'll have to get you back on after the Olympia, maybe go over some of the results and break them down with us.
Absolutely, man. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. That's going to take us to the end of another episode of Guru Talk. I'm Dave Palumbo with Dom Mutascio. We'll see you next time.